Rome was not born an empire. It did not begin with marble cities, powerful legions, or emperors crowned in gold. Rome began small, vulnerable, surrounded by rivals, shaped by hardship rather than destiny. Yet from this unremarkable beginning emerged a civilization that would dominate the ancient world, command armies across 3 continents, and define power so completely that even today, centuries after its fall, we still live in its shadow. The Roman Empire ruled longer than most modern nations have existed. It built roads that still guide our cities, laws that still shape our courts, and political ideas that still influence governments around the world. But Rome's greatest achievement was also its greatest danger. As it expanded, it transformed itself, and in doing so, slowly undermined the very foundations that made its rise possible. This is not simply the story of how Rome conquered the world. It is the story of how power grows, how it sustains itself, and how it ultimately collapses, not suddenly, but gradually, through choices made over generations. To understand Rome is to understand how civilizations rise and why they fall. Rome's destiny was shaped long before its armies marched across Europe. The Italian peninsula forced interaction. It lacked natural isolation, meaning Rome could never rely on geography alone for protection. Survival required vigilance, organization, and constant readiness for conflict. The Tiber River provided life and trade, but also exposure. Rome learned early that strength mattered. Unlike many civilizations, Rome did not grow inward. It expanded outward because it had to. Conflict was not a temporary phase. It was a condition of existence. This forged a culture that valued discipline, endurance, and unity. War was not an exception. It was expected. Rome's genius was not innovation alone. It was absorption. Roman culture freely borrowed from the Etruscans, Greeks, and countless others. Rome did not fear influence. It reshaped it. This adaptability would later allow Rome to govern millions of people without erasing their identities, a critical reason for its longevity. The Romans understood that stories create nations. Their founding myth, Romulus and Remus, was violent, tragic, and unapologetic. It reflected Rome's acceptance of harsh reality. Power often came through conflict, and survival demanded strength. Early Roman society revolved around family, honor, and religion. Political authority was inseparable from divine approval. Rituals governed war, leadership, and law. Even rebellion against kings was framed as a moral act, not chaos. When the monarchy fell, Romans did not reject order. They refined it. Fear of tyranny became sacred. The Republic was not designed for efficiency, but for control of ambition. Power was divided because Romans believed no one should be trusted with too much of it. Ironically, this fear would later push Rome toward empire. The Roman Republic thrived on tension. Political competition was fierce, public life was brutal, and ambition was rewarded. Yet the system worked because it aligned personal success with service to the state. Roman armies were citizen armies. Soldiers fought not for pay, but for land and status. Victory meant survival. Defeat meant extinction. This created an unmatched sense of loyalty and discipline. Rome's expansion across Italy was not just conquest, it was integration. Conquered peoples became allies, then citizens. Rome did not rule by fear alone, it ruled by inclusion. This strategy allowed Rome to mobilize vast manpower and resources unmatched by its rivals. But expansion brought new pressures. The Republic had been designed for a city-state, not a Mediterranean empire. As Rome expanded beyond Italy, war became constant and distant. Victories brought wealth on an unprecedented scale. Gold, slaves, and land flooded into Rome. The elite prospered. Ordinary citizens did not. Small farmers were displaced by massive estates worked by enslaved labor. Urban poverty increased. Political offices became tools for personal enrichment rather than public service. The Republic still existed, but its social contract was breaking. Rome had conquered its enemies abroad, but inequality was creating enemies within. Attempts to fix Rome's problems failed violently. Reformers were murdered. Political disagreements turned deadly. The idea that violence could solve political conflict took root. Generals gained loyalty by promising rewards. Armies followed individuals instead of institutions. Civil wars became recurring events, not exceptions. Rome was still powerful, but it was no longer stable. Julius Caesar did not destroy the Republic alone. He exposed its failure. His military brilliance made him indispensable. His popularity made him dangerous. Crossing the Rubicon was not ambition alone. It was admission that Rome could no longer govern itself through law alone. Caesar ruled decisively, but his power frightened the elite. His assassination was meant to restore the Republic. Instead, it confirmed its death. Augustus understood something Caesar did not. Romans feared kings, but craved stability. He preserved republican language while ruling as emperor. Peace returned. Administration stabilized. Rome accepted the empire because it worked. This marked Rome's transformation, from a state built on citizen participation to one built on obedience. Rome at its peak was astonishing. Roads connected continents. Trade networks spanned from Britain to India. Law unified diverse cultures. Citizenship expanded. Yet this stability depended on strong emperors. Weak leadership meant disaster. The system was efficient, but fragile. By the early 3rd century, the Roman Empire entered what many historians consider the most dangerous period in its entire existence. This was not a single war, invasion, or rebellion, but a convergence of disasters that struck Rome simultaneously. Political instability, economic collapse, military pressure, and demographic decline all reinforced one another, creating a crisis that nearly ended Roman civilization centuries before its actual fall. Emperors no longer ruled for decades. Many ruled for months. The army, once the empire's greatest strength, became its most destabilizing force. Soldiers proclaimed their generals emperors, assassinated rulers who failed to pay them, and marched across Roman territory not as defenders, but as political kingmakers. Authority no longer flowed from Rome outward. It flowed from the battlefield inward. At the same time, Rome's economy began to fracture. Continuous warfare drained the treasury. To pay soldiers, emperors debased the currency, reducing the silver content of coins. Inflation soared. Trade declined. Cities shrank. Trust in the imperial system eroded, especially in the western provinces where wealth was thinner and defense more difficult. External pressures intensified the chaos. Germanic tribes pressed along the Rhine and Danube frontiers. In the east, the Persian Sassanid Empire replaced the Parthians and proved far more aggressive and capable. Roman territory was invaded repeatedly, not as isolated raids, but as sustained pressure against weakening borders. Plagues swept through the empire, killing millions and reducing the workforce. Fewer farmers meant less food. Fewer taxpayers meant less revenue. Fewer soldiers meant weaker defenses. The empire entered a vicious cycle from which recovery seemed increasingly unlikely. That Rome survived this period at all is remarkable, but survival came at a cost. Rome's survival was not accidental. It came through drastic reform. Emperors like Diocletian recognized that the empire could no longer function as it once had. The old system of centralized authority was too fragile for a territory that spanned continents. Diocletian fundamentally transformed Roman governance. He divided the empire administratively, creating multiple centers of power. He restructured taxation, fixed prices, and expanded the bureaucracy. Society became more rigid. People were increasingly bound to their professions. Mobility declined. Freedom was sacrificed for stability. The army was reorganized, expanded, and professionalized further. Defense became more defensive than expansionist. Rome was no longer conquering. It was holding on. These reforms stabilized the empire temporarily, but they also marked a turning point. Rome became more authoritarian, more militarized, and more distant from its citizens. The empire survived, but it no longer resembled the Rome of earlier centuries. One of the most profound changes in Roman history did not come from invasion or reform, but belief. Christianity, once a small and persecuted sect, spread steadily through Roman cities and communities. Its message of universal salvation, moral equality, and loyalty to a higher authority resonated deeply in a world exhausted by violence and uncertainty. For centuries, Rome had tolerated many religions, but Christianity was different. It rejected traditional Roman gods and challenged the idea that the emperor was divinely sanctioned. This made it appear politically dangerous. Persecution followed, but it failed to stop the spread. In the 4th century, everything changed. Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity, and later emperors embraced it fully. The religion that once stood outside Roman power became intertwined with it. This transformation reshaped Roman society. Loyalty shifted gradually from emperor and state to faith and church. Bishops gained influence. Pagan traditions declined. Rome's identity moved away from civic duty and toward spiritual belonging. Christianity did not cause Rome's fall, but it changed how Romans understood authority, sacrifice, and the purpose of empire. The Roman world was no longer united by tradition alone, but by belief, and belief could divide as easily as it could unite. By the late 4th century, the Roman Empire was effectively split into 2 distinct worlds. The Eastern Roman Empire, centered around Constantinople, was wealthier, more urbanized, and better defended. The Western Roman Empire, centered around Rome and later Ravenna, was poorer, more rural, and increasingly unstable. This division was not merely administrative. It was structural. The East could afford armies, fortifications, and diplomacy. The West struggled to pay soldiers and relied increasingly on non-Roman mercenaries. When waves of migrating peoples moved westward, pushed by pressures further east, the Western Empire lacked the strength to manage them effectively. Some groups were settled as allies, others rebelled. Authority fragmented. Rome itself, once the heart of the empire, became politically irrelevant. Emperors ruled elsewhere. The city that had ruled the world was now symbolic rather than powerful. The final centuries of the Western Roman Empire were not marked by sudden collapse, but by gradual erosion. Roman institutions weakened slowly. Law persisted even as authority vanished. Cities emptied, trade declined. The imperial government struggled to respond to multiple threats at once. Germanic kingdoms emerged within Roman territory, not always as enemies, but as successors. Many adopted Roman laws, titles, and customs. Rome did not fall to outsiders alone. It transformed into something else. In 476 CE, the last Western Roman emperor was deposed. There was no great final battle, no dramatic end. For many, life simply continued under new rulers. The Roman Empire had not been destroyed in a moment. It had faded. While the West declined, the Eastern Roman Empire endured. Known later as the Byzantine Empire, it preserved Roman law, administration, and identity for nearly 1,000 more years. Constantinople stood as a fortress of Roman civilization. Its emperors still called themselves Roman. Its citizens still lived under Roman law. When the city finally fell in 1453, the Roman Empire truly ended, long after most people believe it already had. Rome's legacy is not measured in ruins alone. It lives in legal systems, political ideas, languages, architecture, and institutions. Modern states still borrow from Roman concepts of citizenship, law, and governance. Rome rose through discipline, unity, and adaptation. It fell through inequality, overextension, and internal decay. Rome was not unique. It was human. And that is why its story still matters.